Good morning, Joe. So, hey, I'm really excited because you sent me video of you actually doing a backside 50-50 on the low coping, which is incredible. I mean, several sessions ago, we talked about you sliding, just getting to a point where you could slide all the way in and bump into the other training. And you're doing that now routinely, which is awesome. And I thought this would be really cool just to show a quick update as to how you got there, where the breakthrough came from. And, in skateboarding and learning, it's whenever you have a coach or you're learning on your own, it's a creative process. And if you try to just do things the way that everybody else has done them in the past, trial and error, that process, generally it will produce results, good and bad. But when you get in that creative learning process and you start to think outside the box, you come up with some really cool ideas, which is what's been happening here. This is you literally just turning under the coping and simulating a backside 50-50 on the tranny. So you're learning to break that apart. Tell me about this. How did that feel? Was that valuable or something that contributed to your overall success here?
It was a step change in my ability to control myself while I'm doing a backside kick turn. I went from doing an arc, like a parabola, to doing, I like to think of those as square turns or 2-point turns. I go up, I scoop a turn with my back foot. Notice how I'm carving in. And then I feel like I'm sitting on the wall like Spider-Man as I go across. So I'm locked in. I'm rolling across the thing. And then I deliberately do a separate turn to come in. So this has been a major breakthrough for me.
Well, the really cool thing that happened here, let me show you something really quick and then I'll let you finish. This is something that's really important. You have started to carve on one set of wheels, on your back wheels. So right here, it's really obvious to me that you're tipping towards your toe side edge as you do your kick turn, which is really critical because now you're starting to shape your line through the back wheels and changing or shifting your line of momentum across that transition, across the wall. That's really cool. And that's a breakthrough because before you would just go straight up, pivot right at the top with no intention to carve across. And now you're flowing through a carve on your back wheels.
I feel like it's even more than a flow through. It's actually a ride across. That's the big change for me is I'm now riding across the coping and then I'm thinking, okay, I'm running out of ramp. I'm running out of speed. It's time to go down. And I deliberately lift again and set it down.
Yeah. And when I say flow through, I'm actually talking about the turn you're making to get across the ramp. So this turn right here.
Right. The turn in.
You are flowing through a carve in your initial kick turn, in your 90-degree kick turn right here. And that's something that you've just started to develop. It's a really important piece of the puzzle. And you can see you're tipping towards your toes there. So you're committed to your toe side edge. Then even as you pick up, you stay committed to your toes and you're still turning on those back wheels. So it's full commitment to the toes. And then you're absolutely right. Now you're rolling across. You're intentionally lining it up across, riding it. As you said, locked in like Spider-Man on the wall, which is cool. And then here's your second move. You're absolutely right. Here comes the second shoulder turn, right? And you're releasing with a little kick turn and just flowing right down in as if you're riding the coping. That's so cool. And that simulation is probably one of the more important that anyone can learn anywhere. You can do this on a ramp, on a transition, or a bank, anywhere you want. And I think that's a huge step. So nicely done. Let's go. I want to get into another video really quick. Okay. So here's that commitment to the carve in. And you can see, if you look at just your back wheels, how your board is really tipping. You can see the edge of the board getting close to the wheels. This is that turn that I'm talking about. Your front wheels are now released and you are still committed to a carve on those back trucks. It's beautiful. So you got that nice little entry carve right here. Then even when you pick up, you're still committed to the carve. And now you've redirected momentum across the wall. That's one of the most critical things you're going to feel in a backside 50-50, and you're totally locking it in here. And there's that second turn out. So you've got your turn in and your turn out that you're feeling. Really cool. And there's that scary pool coping too. Just gonna point that out right there. So, got a whole bunch of bump on it, doesn't it? And for those who don't know what bump is where your coping extends off or above the face of the transition, you know, the cover, the top sheeting of the transition. So he's got like an inch of bump there, which is pretty significant for someone learning.
Well, when I was building the ramp, I asked the guys who were building it to give me a 3/8 of an inch bump. So I ended up with 3 times as much height as I wanted on that coping. So it's very significant. It's very, very jarring when I go up on that coping.
I'll bet it is. It's funny how the design of wood ramps tends to like shift a little bit. Like being precise can be hard.
The cool thing is I'm thinking about putting a piece of plywood underneath that so I can kind of ramp up to the coping and smooth everything out. So it'll make it less gradual. I think that might be also a breakthrough thing for me.
Like a little shim. I love that.
Yeah, just like a shim or a wheelchair ramp.
Well, that's exactly what you've done here in this video, only you've done it on your bank side to get used to it. And so here you've done a really smart thing. We started talking about, we need to get you a lower coping. We need to mount a half cut piece of PVC down lower on your transition. And you got so excited. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to go grab a board. And so sure enough, you created your own little simulator right here, which is awesome. So this is on your bank side of your ramp. So for those who don't know, Joe's ramp is a bank to transition with 2 heights of transition, but 1 smooth bank. And even right here where he goes through the transition, that's a cut and shape tranny. So it's not just a flat to up kind of transition like you might experience on some banks. It's really smooth, which makes this side super easy for simulating things. So right here, you just grabbed a piece of plywood, a couple of screws, and you're off and running. And you're literally getting that sensation of going up over a coping, feeling a little bump without the fear. Tell me about that.
I wanted to create something that was similar to the flow of going on coping without the fear. So the flow without the fear. And this is a 1/4 inch sheet of plywood. So I can roll up, roll off. It's not going to stop me. And it forces me to, once I'm up on it, to actually take a lateral roll, to roll sideways. Before this, I was going up and I was pivoting as quickly as possible to get around so that I could go back down. Right. And this acted as a guide so that I could change the way that I'm doing my turns, make them into 2-point turns.
That's awesome. And again, look at that turn shape. See your back wheels rounding out a turn right there. That's that redirection of momentum. So instead of going straight up and pivoting on the coping, now you're redirecting into said coping. I mean, simulated coping here, but this is awesome. And like you said, I love it. You eliminate the fear. And whenever you can create a half step that eliminates the fear or reduces the fear enough to where you are mentally free to move, that's huge. Because right now, the aesthetics of that pool coping, it's quite daunting. And then the narrowness of the short of your low steel coping, that probably feels there's some intimidation there because it's a tight little spot to work with. But here you've got all this freedom of movement, plus it's a bank, so you're not worried about the shape of the transition. It's just a slow, smooth roll. Aesthetically, this is easier. Kinesthetically, this is easier. And that's where things work. When the aesthetics match the kinesthetics, you will be free to do things that you normally would not do. Really cool. I think I've got another shot I want to look at of that exact same thing. Yeah, this one you added to it. Okay, so in this one, you've added another sheet of plywood. So were you just thinking about progressing your way up to a bigger bump?
Yes, that's what I was trying to do. Is I was trying to get closer to the bump that I feel when I hit coping.
That's awesome. Here, let me move this thing over here. Let's take a look at that again, because that's exactly what you're getting, right? Are you feeling a little more bump on that? Just a little more?
Just a little bit, and nothing that changed the way I skate.
So real gradual, and you're still your trucks are still not touching coping at all. You're not touching the wood at all, but you're getting that sensation of locking it in, timing, getting your line right, lining the board up over a specific target, and committing to a turn in and a turn out. That's awesome. That's what a tremendous hack this turned out to be. Okay, so if you were going to do something before, because the next shot I'm going to show is you actually backside 50-50, but let me ask you something. If just thinking creatively, because my mind races, I've got all kinds of ideas of what I want you to do to create simulators, but what would you do to intensify this simulation before going back to the transition or to coping? Would you add anything else?
Oh, definitely. If I had some type of slippery material that could reach my trucks just barely, yeah, I'd put that on the lower edge so that I could roll up onto something and start simulating that feeling of having my trucks dragging while I roll.
That's awesome. My mind goes to wanting you to check this out. For whatever reason, I want you to mount a half cut piece of 2-inch PVC, right where that arrow is pointing, or you could get a small tube of PVC. So you could go with just the smallest pipe you can find, and it would probably be just high enough for you to touch. And you could easily, modify, and with a half cut, half round of PVC, you can just a couple of screws, you'll zip it right in and get that feel. And again, you'll have that modification, but you can cut that. If you get a 2-inch round of PVC, it'll be a nice big diameter. And then you can slice off, with a skill saw or however you want to do it, whatever height you want out of that PVC coping. And you have a pretty good simulator. So something to consider, but at the same time, you've also got that nice 20-inch high coping across the way, which is really cool. All right. So this one was really clean, and you did it. You fully carved into that little 4-foot wide section of coping, which looks tiny from this angle. And you're running right along the edge of your ramp, which is also there's an intimidation factor there. So this is still pretty, it's pretty rad, honestly, because you're working every inch of this ramp that you can. Right up to the edge and just bumped right into the coping. So you're fully grinding on coping, and you're doing everything the same, and you're not afraid of running into that wall for whatever reason. What do you think made the difference? What gave you the confidence right here to do all this?
The fact that I'd learned how to control the flow. So now I wasn't trying to get up and off coping. I was actually trying to go sideways, to go parallel with coping. It was I changed the flow of my turn.
Right. Well, there's toe side engagement right there. You're tipping towards your toes right there. There's that little bit of turn shape right there. Look at the back wheel starting to cut across. So you've got momentum. You have redirected just a little bit of momentum through here across. There you lock in the back trucks, set the front trucks down, just on coping into the wall, and then bump out. And that is just so cool. And all that work on your axle stalls, your 5.0 stalls, all those different kick turns you've done have given you the foundation to have total control and confidence when you make those moves. The idea, and I think we all kind of think this way, the idea that, it's going to take a few steps to get there. And if we can't get there in a few steps, then we're not ever going to have it. That's mistaken thinking. But building up foundations, one small piece at a time. Like, what do we start with? You recount really quick for me. What do you remember us going through? Just the things that come to your mind that we've worked on over the past couple months here.
First of all, it was becoming aware. That was the number one thing, most important thing that we've done is I've started developing a body awareness, and it's a dynamic body awareness. So you made me aware of how my head affects my shoulders, affects my hips, affects my knees, affects my ankles. So I become body aware, and I've tried to make it so that my whole transition as I turn is coordinated. And then another one that we did was called self-analysis. So it was being able to actually do something and then actually be aware of what I did, identify an issue, and then change a component. So we worked out my angular momentum, discovered that my shoulders were blocking my turn. and pointed out that if my head was ahead of my shoulders, then my shoulders would be able to follow through.
Right. Head connected to shoulders, shoulders connected to hips, and hips connected to feet and board, right? And so, yeah, that awareness was huge. And then we did countless analysis of just different types of kick turns and what you're feeling, and then all the stalls and on and on. I mean, how many reps do you think you have in of those things?
Well, last time you asked me this, I had 1,000. Now I've easily got 2,000 reps in. That's been another thing that's helped me a lot, is the fact that once I learn something, I don't say, okay, bagged it and go on to the next thing. I reinforce it by doing it dozens and dozens of times before I try any variations.
Right. That is awesome. So nice to have your little playground in the backyard. Here you go. Here it is again. Watch that board tip towards the back wheel all the way through. You're just carving, right? So you're getting that little bit of turn shape right here at the end, which is so critical. You are now balanced over your toes rather than getting rocked back towards your heels through the turn. You set it down right on coping. There's the grind. And you're out. And one really nice thing is you've also developed a sensitivity for controlling the pressure on the front trucks when they land on the coping. Instead of overloading your front foot, which will cause your trucks to bite and stop when you get up into the coping, you're actually getting kind of sensitive with it. We were talking about that the other day too. That's really cool.
There's another thing evidenced right there, if you can back it up.
Sure.
And that was, you discovered that I'm rocking back on my heels normally. If this one, you look at this, see the wheels that are on the ramp, they don't weigh down on the platform. In fact, they might not even be touching it. So I'm keeping my weight on my toes there and keeping everything in. And my center of gravity, if you can point to that, it is clearly inside the coping and definitely not on the platform.
So all this mass, let's do that again. Because you're doing a couple of things. So when you talk about your center of gravity, what really, let's talk about mass. All this mass up here is inside the coping. All of this mass right here, which is normally what I would call your core. So right. Put a circle around this, this sort of area right here around your hips and your upper legs, that's just over your toes, which is where it needs to be. So you've got your upper body committed in, you've got your center body, your core, committed over the toes just slightly, and that's evidenced by this and this. Those ankles are staying flexed. So when you look at the angle of the lower legs right here, right, those are tipping in to the coping, which is all this is connecting. So it starts with the ankles staying flexed, allowing your lower legs to tip in, and then that commitment of the upper body and the core over the toes. And you're right, when I walk through this here, let me get back on the screen on the controls here. You're absolutely right. When you set down, watch this. Your wheels don't touch and you're balancing towards your toes. I mean, right there's a little bit where your front truck flexed out on you. And that's just because of where you're aligned. You can see the coping's really close to the down tranning wheel, to the toe side wheel. So your truck flexed out, but the board is still tipped towards the toe side edge, which is the key thing. You are pressuring and tipping towards the toes through this whole thing. And that's a level of control you did not have. This is awesome. I mean, this is just, you're breaking through, man. You're breaking through. Let me ask you this. The next step for you to get to the gnarly pool coping is overcoming the fear of the bump, right? So you've got an idea. You were saying in the beginning, you want to put like a shim, like a piece of plywood, and just mount it there to the top of the tranny.
That's right. Right now, the coping is bumped out like this.
Yeah.
So what I want to do now is I want to take a piece of plywood, maybe 12 inches wide, and put it flush with the coping so I can just roll onto an edge instead of rolling out on a bump.
I love it.
That's what I want to try out and see how that works.
I love it. You might take your same setup. You're using two pieces of plywood stacked on top of each other. You might find that you go 1/4 inch and then add another 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch sheet or whatever, and you get there just through progressive steps. Oh, that's going to feel interesting. It'll feel like big, heavy tiles as your wheels roll over it, maybe, I wonder. But that's cool. I think it's a great idea. And I'm looking forward to seeing you try that. So I think as soon as you get some footage of that, let's reconnect and see how that goes, because I love the creativity. I love how you're You're battling, you're replacing fear of the unknown and fear of this scary thing with steps that you can manage and control. And this is you taking control of your learning. This is you analyzing yourself, analyzing your emotions, your thoughts, and your feelings, right? Your physical sensations, and managing the learning. This is incredible.
Thanks to you, Coach Chris. Thanks a lot.
Nice job, man. We'll see you next time.
Our goal is to help you learn how to skateboard and understand more about skateboarding. If this video helped you, be sure to hit us up in the comments below and tell us what you'd like us to focus on for our next video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and then subscribe to our channel and tell your friends all about us. If you'd like to learn more about the United States Skateboard Education Association, please visit www.ussea.us, where you can learn more about how to skate, learn more about helping others learn how to skate, and become a certified skateboard coach.